All right, let's dive into the pretty wild and complex world of Chinese elites who are using international surrogacy. And they're not just starting families, they're trying to build what they hope will be unstoppable dynasties. It is a crazy story that takes us from these huge mansions in LA all the way to the dark underbelly of a global market. So it really all kicks off with this one almost unbelievable question that our source material digs into. Why in the world are Chinese billionaires having literally hundreds of babies in the US? And the answer? Well, it opens up a pretty disturbing rabbit hole of ambition, global markets, and some really tough ethical questions. So, where does a number like 22 fit into all this? Well, imagine this. Police in Los Angeles are investigating a potential child abuse case. They show up at a mansion, and instead of one child, they find 22 toddlers. All of them supposedly the children of just one couple, Guang Xuan and Sylvia Zhang. 22. But if you think 22 is a lot, that's really just the warm-up. The source then points us to a guy named Xu. He's the billionaire founder of a Chinese video game company called Dai Network. His own company, get this, admits he has fathered over 100 children through surrogacy. So what's the goal here? Why have so many kids? The ambition is just staggering. According to the source, the hope is that these kids will one day grow up and marry Elon Musk's descendants. This isn't just about having a big family. No, it's a strategic move to build a dynasty so powerful it can link up with other tech titans. Okay, so to make sense of this whole thing, here's the plan. We'll start with these billionaires and their US babies. Then we'll get into why they're even looking outside China in the first place. We'll explore the global market that's sprung up, uncover its really dark side, and then finally, we'll grapple with the big ethical questions this whole thing raises. So first up, let's talk about the key players, because our source material makes it really clear we're not talking about just a few isolated incidents. This seems to be a growing trend among China's super rich who are using American-born surrogate babies to build a completely new kind of global empire. And what's really interesting is that the motivations can be totally different. So you've got the LA couple with their 22 kids. Then you have Xu, who the source says specifically wants boys because he thinks they're superior. But then on the flip side, you have Wang Huiwu, a female CEO. She was reportedly buying eggs from models and women with PhDs, and she preferred girls, hoping they'd one day marry world leaders. So this leads to a pretty obvious question, right? Why go through all this trouble and spend all this money to do this abroad? Why not just do it in China? Well, the answer comes down to some pretty powerful push factors. It really boils down to one simple thing. It's illegal. The source explains that the Chinese Communist Party has been cracking down hard on surrogacy for years. So that legal wall is really the main reason these wealthy individuals are going international for these services. And we're not talking small numbers here. The scale is huge. According to researchers cited in the source, between 2014 and 2020, couples from China made up a massive 41% of all foreign surrogacies in the United States. That's a huge slice of the market, and it's almost all driven by that ban back home. But the US isn't the only game in town. This massive demand has basically created a sprawling global industry, a whole worldwide market with different options and different price points for these would-be parents. I mean, let's talk money for a second. Having a surrogate child in the US is not cheap. You're looking at anywhere from $120,000 to $250,000. And naturally, that high price tag makes a lot of people start looking for cheaper alternatives. And that's exactly where a country like Georgia comes onto the scene. The source points to it as a major alternative. It costs less, and its market absolutely exploded after Russia banned surrogacies for foreigners back in 2022. Now, it's become a huge hub for Chinese couples, apparently second only to the US for this specific group. And if you want a mental image of just how big this has gotten, the source gives us this incredible detail. One social media account actually warned people that the 5-hour flight from Georgia to Xinjiang in China is often just packed with crying newborns and their new parents. It's a pretty vivid picture of this international baby pipeline in action. Okay, but underneath the surface of this whole global market, things get dark, really dark. The source makes it crystal clear that whenever you have this much demand and this much money changing hands, exploitation and organized crime, they're usually not too far behind. Now, to really understand some of the stories that come next, you have to know this term, heita. It translates to a black child, and it means a child without an official household registration, or hukou in China. Without that, you're basically a non-person. You're locked out of public school, healthcare, everything. And that Haida status has absolutely devastating real-world consequences. The source tells this tragic story from Chinese state media about a surrogate mother who was found to have syphilis. The biological parents just canceled the contract and abandoned the baby girl. They just refused to take her, leaving her as a Haida with no legal status and a completely uncertain future. And the darkness doesn't stop at abandonment. It goes all the way into organized crime. The source zeroes in on this company called the BabyCam Medical Consulting Group. Looked like a normal surrogacy agency in Georgia. But according to Thai police, it was actually a front for a truly horrific criminal operation. So here's how this horrifying scheme allegedly went down. They would lure women from places like Thailand with promises of good money for surrogacy work. But as soon as they got to Georgia, their passports were taken away. They were then trapped in a house with over 100 other women and forced to have their eggs harvested every single month, completely against their will. And to really get a sense of the level of horror these women went through, the source pulls this quote from a New York Times report. The women who had been trafficked said this ordeal in Georgia was worse than when they'd been trafficked as prostitutes. As prostitutes, they said, at least they got paid and knew what was happening. Here, they were just prisoners. So after hearing all that, the dynastic plans, the abandoned babies, the criminal rings, you just have to step back and look at the bigger picture. The source uses all these stories to raise some really profound ethical questions about this entire industry. I mean, this whole situation forces us to confront some really tough dilemmas. Is it right to use women who are economically desperate as surrogates? What does it mean for birthright citizenship when kids are being commissioned by the hundreds? And maybe the biggest question of all, at what point does this stop being a medical service and start becoming, simply, the buying and selling of human life? And just when you think this story can't get any more like science fiction, the source drops this little detail on us. China has reportedly developed an artificial womb, basically a pregnancy robot, a piece of tech that could take the human element out of this completely and, you guessed it, raise a whole new set of ethical landmines. And all of this leaves us with one final crucial question to think about. As technology like artificial wombs becomes real, the kind of dynastic ambitions we're seeing from today's billionaires could become available to a lot more people. And that forces us to ask, where do we as a society draw the line between helping people have children and the outright commodification of human life?